my name is Debbie Kermode and I'm the Chief Executive Artistic Director at MAC.
And my name is Maryam Wahid. I am a photographer.
And we're absolutely thrilled to be here in the exhibition. We became acquainted after your graduate show. I remember going to the university and seeing Maryam's artwork then and recognising the talent of this fantastic artist. And we've been following that career forward. There was an amazing opportunity that arose a couple of years ago called Transforming Narratives. It was a city-wide initiative led by the British Council and the Arts Council, which looked at placing work from South Asia, particularly from Pakistan and Bangladesh, at the heart of public programme in the city. And it was because of that opportunity that Maryam and I got talking about developing a new body of work, which you see here today. And we had really great adventures along the way. We went to the Karachi Biennale, we went on many research trips, and together we formulated this, as I say, this really exquisite but very personal, emotional exhibition based on Maryam's family.
The exhibition is titled Zaibunnisa, which was chosen because it was my mum's name before she got married. Zaibunnisa was always in the background of our family history and stories. I would look at these old pictures of my mum and really wonder who she was before she got married and perhaps what my life could have been like if my family stayed in Lahore in Pakistan. I'm really excited for you to come and see the exhibition and see where that wonder has taken me. I was always very curious to just, find out who she was, what happened before I was born, and how did we get here? How did my grandfather come to the UK? How did my mum come to the UK? And what was happening in Pakistan at the time? I'm always really curious to know about that. I would say that my practice is heavily influenced by my family history and my mother's identity. As a woman with Pakistani origins, I feel that there are so many things that shape our lives as women. There are so many different influences. Photography really helps me discover but also really understand these complexities and also move forward. Before going out to Pakistan and when I was kind of initially getting my head around how Zaibunnisa will be shot and what will it be about, one of the things that really spoke to me were these pictures that I would see of my mum in her home and of her family members in this home, of my Nana Boo in on the Pakistani bed sitting there playing a little doll. I wanted to know what was that space like in person, but what is going on around that picture as well, what is going on behind the picture maybe. I wanted to go back and really visit those places and see what's changed and wanted to see how that impacted me today as somebody who has had no connection to Pakistan and as somebody who has had no connection with grandparents, and the only relationship that I have is through these photographs and stories that I have of my grandparents and certain objects that I own, and I think particularly from everyone in my maternal family, my grandmother was someone that really stood out to me. And maybe it's because I had quite little information on who she was and about her, and my mum would tell me wonderful stories about her, and we knew a little bit about her kind of story of her migrating from Srinagar with her mother to Amritsar and then from Amritsar to Pakistan. So I knew a little bit about her kind of family history, but I knew very little about her every day-to-day kind of, who she was, what her beliefs were. There was very little of that. I was told very little about that. And that was one of the things I really wanted to resolve when I was out there. I wanted to have conversations with my cousins that existed and family members and second cousins, my mum's second cousins, speak to them. I really wanted to understand who she was, and I think, the primary motive for that was because I am also a British Asian woman, and as a female I wanted to know what it was like for women that came before me and what were their stories. There was also just very little belongings of hers, so this was this one beautiful necklace that I'm wearing which was gifted to my mother by my nana. I was super thrilled to finally go to my mother's homeland and to finally meet her family. I had never been to Pakistan, and it was only until 2019, when I was 23 years old, that I got to go. The last time she visited Lahore was in 1994, and she didn't really plan to go back to Lahore. This opportunity really changed my life because my mum actually said, okay, well, you can't go Pakistan alone, I'm coming with you. And that's when Zaibunnisa and the work started. It all started from the basic things that I had, which were a few pictures of mum, a few objects of mum, dupattas, clothing, and stories that connected and resonated with me and spoke to me and made me really go and understand these stories a lot better and a lot clearer. For me, going to Pakistan, arriving there at Lahore, the airport, I felt like, I didn't instantly kind of feel connected to the people that I saw or the place, but I felt like there was something there that belonged to me and that spoke to me. So as a 23-year-old arriving there, I just kind of walked out and saw hundreds of people at arrivals. It was a very chaotic journey as well, because I was alone and had all this luggage on me, had camera stuff with me. But all of that was part of my experience. I was writing a diary there every night and every moment I could, where I was capturing these moments. I was imagining situations as well. I was trying to understand from different perspectives the situation that I was in. When I was travelling around in Lahore, it was just an absolutely breathtaking experience because there was always something going on. I was extremely intrigued as well, some of the sites that I would see. I do a lot of filming to kind of inform my practice, so I was out there kind of vlogging and filming these little travels that I would have with my family and just following my mother around. I think it was just the excitement and the happiness that my mum had to be in Pakistan and be in her birthplace, in her home country, which I think was just lovely.
I'm going to try and film you, Mum. Look.
For me, the most interesting places in Pakistan were my grandparents' home and the natural landscape in Lahore. So when I would see nature, when I would see trees, and when I would see this really built-up city with a beautiful, 1,000-year-old tree in the middle of it, for me that was just really, really surreal, just to see that in this kind of busy built-up city, beautiful pieces of nature. And naturally I would just think about, although kind of cities and buildings, they're broken down and they're changed and they're adapted and manipulated, for me these natural elements and these pieces of nature were the same pieces of nature that were there when my grandparents were alive and when my mother grew up. So that to me was really what spoke to me. And actually my mother's home, why that was so interesting and special was my great-grandfather in 1947, when the partition of India and Pakistan happened. Him and my grandfather and their family by foot came to Lahore from Amritsar in India and purchased that house as their kind of first house. And my great-grandfather, my mum describes that he established that home as the home of all of his family and for all his generations to live in. So when I went to that house today, and for Zaibunnisa, I still saw those little bits and elements of his generation and his son's generation, which would be my grandfather, but also their children, my mother and her cousins. And then it was really lovely because I could see what the next generation were doing to the house, and the next generation after that was also present. So the house itself, you know, really just spoke to me and really had a presence of my grandparents' lives, but actually my mother's life as well. And that really aided my work as well. That really shaped the way that Zaibunnisa was being shot out there. When I visited the house that my mother was born in, it was a very incredible experience. You know, as I was kind of navigating through the house, moving between the different rooms and meeting my kind of third and fourth cousins in that house that live there now was just a wonderful experience. And I couldn't help but kind of imagine what it would have been like to see my grandparents in these spaces today. My grandfather would look out of his bedroom window and feed pigeons. They showed me that pigeons still come here, and that really touched me because here in the UK, you know, my mum, she religiously every day feeds pigeons, and in our house we just have a flock of pigeons waiting to be fed. That really was interesting, that actually my mum did something that her father did, and I would observe this every day about my mother, not knowing that actually those pigeons and those things around us are probably always going to be there. We all kind of go one day, and these things remain around us, and yeah, and then they become stories that we talk about. A lot of the photographs that I've taken are photographs that I have derived from my family album, and essentially what I've done is looked for those places, or places that look quite similar to the pictures that I've constantly seen of Lahore as a child and then growing up, and for 23 years I'd not visited Lahore, so for me Lahore was whatever I saw in that book and in that family album. Getting close to those markets and those places, even my mother's home, maternal home, was just really completed me. It really completed who I was. It really completed those stories that I felt really were lost in my life, or there was no clarity in where that place was or who those people were, but all of it made sense when I got there. I wanted this work to tell a story, but also be quite poetic in its own way. I wanted it to capture those signs and symbols that connected me with my family history and connected me with my heritage. There's a picture of me with my hands out like this, and I'm wearing a green outfit. I have got whole wheat flour dusted on my hands. This was because my great-grandfather and even my paternal grandfather would have flour mills and supply flour to people in trading. I wanted this piece of history about me to be simplified in one image, and for me that green is so powerful. I went to Pakistan in 2019 for the first time, but then I went 3 times within the year. The third time I visited, I actually really had been thinking about the women there. I'd been thinking about the women in my family, I'd been thinking about my nan, I'd been thinking about their identities essentially and who they were. And I just kind of couldn't help but imagine what my life could have been like if my mum didn't migrate, and if I wasn't in the UK and I was in Pakistan, who would I have been? I just couldn't help but think about me in a parallel universe. And I think with a lot of my work, I always try and look at my subjects and my even if I'm exploring something that is about me, I always try and connect it back to what all of this means to me and why it matters. So I was constantly thinking about this when I was out there. And then I realized that this is why this whole project matters to me, because I really want to celebrate the women that came before me. I want to celebrate my mother's life, but I also want to celebrate women who've actually kind of lived their life, but they did what they could for their future generations. What I heard about my Nana out in Pakistan, and when I would hear her being a selfless woman, her being a homemaker, you know, even when my mum's proposal came to go to the UK, you know, for her to say yes, to say, okay, I'm okay with my daughter moving away to England and starting a life there, that's okay, you know, it's 1980 here, and for me, that to understand that, it's quite selfless to be detached from who you are and what your values are, just so your daughter and their children, you know, that they have a better future, or they have better opportunities, or whatever it is, that they live the life that they can. That's the way I see my life today, that I actually have certain things I'm so grateful for, but because of my, you know, the women who've really kind of encouraged that and supported that, even today with my practice, you know, my mum is a huge advocate and supporter of my work. There came a time where I had to visit the graveyard where my grandparents are resting, and I think it was in really a heavy moment for us all. And I think particularly for my mom, who actually had a relationship with my grandparents, with her parents, and my mom took along her prayer books and took along the Holy Quran and just recited for about 45 minutes over their graves. She made a special prayer, and she made a special prayer to my paternal grandfather. So my dad's father is also buried in Pakistan, so I hadn't met him. He died the same year that I was born. It was a nice way to just feel complete for once, and to feel like I had met them finally, and this is probably the closest I'm going to get to them. Just navigating through that graveyard as well, and finding those graves was really, really difficult. I mean, the graveyard is huge. It's a huge graveyard. We had to drive to 3 different locations just to get to their graves. It was just a space which was so built up with graves and trees and structure as well. So much was kind of deteriorating in that space. But actually I wouldn't have got to this place, as in finding their graves, if it wasn't for my uncle, and if it wasn't for the help of these kind of gravekeepers that look after the graves. I wouldn't have got to like my nan's grave, and my mom wouldn't have got to it without that either. So actually I realised that what was happening was so big for me and my whole family.